Welcome to Failing Forward. This show is all about the other side of success. We talk to entrepreneurs, leaders, and innovators who aren't afraid to share the mistakes they've made. Because if there's one thing I know for sure, it's this. Every setback is just a setup for something bigger, if you're willing to learn from it.
Rocking and rolling. All right. Well, hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Failing Forward podcast. My name is Leah, for those of you who don't know, and I am here again today with Tim Petrey, CPA, entrepreneur extraordinaire, who currently is leading the charge as CEO of HD Growth Partners and White Glove Payroll. So first of all, hi, how are you?
Hi, we made it back for the second episode. This is huge. It's officially a streak. That's exciting.
Yeah, very, very exciting. Hopefully the second of many. But today I want to look at failure, specifically through the lens of leadership and decision-making and company culture. So I think it would be good to start with a couple questions specifically about failure in the workplace. And this one is going to be about what does failure actually look like inside your company and how do you identify it early?
So from my perspective, we're very clear about what failure means in our business. Failure from my perspective is if you've made the same mistake on multiple occasions. If you make one mistake, it's one thing and you learn from it. But if you get to the point where you're constantly making the same mistake, then that to me is what we would define as a failure. So it's important in your business to try to build the right guardrails so that you can have that culture of acceptance of failure in introspective learning about what you take out of those failures and being comfortable with sitting down with one another and having those in-depth conversations about the mistakes that you've made and what we're going to learn from them. But ultimately, what the failure would look like is when you're not willing to do that, is when you're not hungry for that progress anymore, and when you've given up on learning from those mistakes and you're just defensive about analyzing the things that didn't go right. So it's something that we look very closely at it on a regular basis at our practice. But we really try to take those steps to just slow down and look at things a little bit closer so we can avoid that true failure.
Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of going to lead me a little bit more into kind of that encouraging a culture of learning from failure, right? Because I do think that's a huge part of this is if people don't feel safe to make a mistake, like that is not going to be great for progress, right? And so like you talked a little bit about this, but kind of what systems do you have in place in order to make failure a safe, constructive part of your culture? So what does that look like?
So I think that there's two main things that we do on a regular basis at HD that are important about just creating that culture. Number one is we have a system for feedback loops. So all of our professionals get a regular scorecard on a monthly basis. There are metrics that are tied back to our values, and we call them our cultural anchors, so that people understand if they're doing a good job or not. And it allows for them to understand the rules of the game, right? So we know that the rule of the game ultimately is progress, not perfection. And we're encouraging that on a regular basis. And the idea for me is never to micromanage people, is to just be the guardrails in place so that they understand, when they're veering off too far this way or veering off too far that way. So you take that feedback loop and those scorecards that you're giving to people on a regular basis, and then you couple that with a pod structure of your teams. So then you've got team leaders that their responsibility is no longer to be what the traditional leader in a business might be, of someone that's just going to tell someone how to do something on a regular basis. Those team leads are in place to encourage and coach those people through those scorecards. If you're not happy with your results, you're not happy with how things went, you're not happy with, losing a client, or that this didn't go as smooth as you thought it should have, you can take the time to sit down and do that analysis after that with your team leader who's empowered with the right resources to coach you through the results that you ultimately want to have. So those team leaders then need to be empowered by a different set of resources. So our team leads have access to coaches and communication coaches that they can meet with on a regular basis so that they can just be more efficient, effective about how to have those conversations, because it's hard.
They are hard. They can be very, very difficult. But I do think that having that expectation from everywhere in the organization that it's okay to have those conversations, and not only is it okay, but it's actually encouraged. I mentioned to you before we started recording that I was just reading that book, Radical Candor, and it's all about being able to have those conversations and also recognizing that like we are here to make each other better. And this is something that I think a lot of people struggle with because, you don't want to step on anybody's toes. You don't want to, but also at the same time, if you're never doing that, if you're never giving people genuinely good, constructive criticism, there's nowhere to go. There's no forward motion happening. And so I think that that's a big part of that culture component, like really making sure that people recognize like, hey, not like we actually want to fail a little bit.
Right.
Like there is an element in which we want that because that means we're trying. That means we're entering uncharted territory. And so I think that's something that we do a good job of.
And what is really important about that is that at the onset, at the beginning of that relationship, you have an agreement. Mm-hmm. You have a non-written contract with that person, with that leader, with that mentor, with that person that's guiding, that you can look at each other and say, I promise to do everything that I can to make you better and to help you achieve your goals.
Even if it hurts a little bit.
Even if it hurts and even if it's hard, I promise to be that person that's going to be real and honest and direct with you.
Yeah.
And on the other side of that contract, on the other side of that agreement, the person that's receiving it is saying, I promise not to take it personally. Mm-hmm. And I promise to know that this is coming from a place of deep caring, and this is coming from a place that you genuinely want what's best of me. Mm-hmm. If you don't have that agreement to start, it won't work.
Yeah.
Because you can't have those really difficult conversations unless the foundation of it is this agreement that this is coming from the right place, mm-hmm. and this is something that's going to be productive and impactful to both of you.
Yeah, because then you are going to be defensive.
Right.
Like it's almost impossible not to be when you feel like that that criticism is coming from a place
it's a natural reaction.
Yeah.
I mean, we're human beings.
Yeah.
If you look at just kind of the core of who we are, like we're survivalists.
Yeah.
Right. So, don't touch the hot stove, mm-hmm. or don't do this or don't do that. You don't want to be harmed. So you naturally will deflect things that are harmful to you.
Sure.
And that's just human beings. That's who we are. So you've got to break that down before you do anything else. And
I think that's really good advice.
Important.
No, that's really good advice. So that being said, also, speaking on that failure and creating that culture, how do you model failure as a leader so that your team feels comfortable? Because yes, it's great to talk about it and we want to have those conversations, but obviously modeling it, being that is, as you know, and as you do, it's the most impactful way to lead. And so like, what are examples of that? Or how do you feel like you and your other leaders in your company, how do you feel that they model that?
I think it's two things. I mean, it's a combination of transparency and vulnerability. I mean, you've got to be able to walk people through your own failures. Mm-hmm. You've got to be able to walk people through those experiences that you've had and share the lessons that you learned from it. Mm-hmm. So, that requires you to have the ability to recall the things that didn't go right and why they didn't go right, and not be able to immediately just blame someone else and be deflective of it, right? You've got to be able to take that step away from the situation and look at it from somebody else's perspective and share that feedback with someone else. And that does require a tremendous amount of vulnerability. And it's something that I've seen some people naturally do well. I've seen some people really, really struggle with as a leader, is to be transparent and vulnerable. Because, historically as a leader, specifically maybe as a man, as a leader, vulnerability is not something that has been encouraged as a male leader in society.
No.
Right? but it's becoming something that is now required of you as a leader, is that you've got to be able to connect with people. You've got to be able to meet people somewhere and be able to see things from their perspective. So it's challenging, and it just requires the right set of resources to just continue to encourage people to test it and try it. And they're not going to be great at it at the beginning, and it's going to have some really difficult conversations that you're super stressed about having, but it gets better and better.
Okay, so I have another question about that specifically. Do you publicly share your own failures with your team? Why or why not? And also how?
Yeah. Yes. In varying ways, we share that. So what I've always tried to do is, I'm the kind of person that it's hard for me to make a decision on my own. I prefer to make decisions once I've vetted it through a variety of other perspectives, right?
Totally, yeah.
So, I will take some of those failures and share that with smaller groups of people first, and
Big
say,
focus group guy.
right.
I love a focus group. You cannot tell me other. I love a focus group. Okay, anyway.
And it's important that it's a blend of perspectives too, right?
Yes.
Because if you're not considering the entire audience, then
Yep.
you're going to inevitably leave somebody out in how you communicate it, right? So
So
we've
spot
got
on.
different pockets. A good example of one is our staff advisory council.
Yeah.
And our staff advisory council has interns and staffs and seniors and people that have been at varying levels of experience at our firm. And so I'll sit down with them and I'll share some of those failures about the things that went right, or I'm sorry, the things that went wrong, and what I learned from it and how it evolved our business. And it helps me prepare the appropriate next steps. Ultimately, all of the processes in our business, everything that we do, every checklist that we fill out, every workflow that we have comes from failures. So without sharing them, then people don't understand why we do things the way that we do things, right? So, you may be doing a tax return or building a widget in a manufacturing facility, and you ask, why do I do this? And you can sit down with him and say, well, the reason that we do this way is because I made this mistake. I lost this client because I didn't check this box correctly. I didn't ask this question the right way. Conversely, in a manufacturing facility, we do this way because someone lost their finger, in the manufacturing piece of machinery or something, but people tend to have more buy-in to systems and processes when they understand that they're rooted in mistakes that were made.
Yeah.
And not just like, when mom and dad said, because I told you so.
100%.
Right. So I think that if we really kind of try to zoom out and look at this from the simplest standpoint, is avoiding that management and leadership style of because I said so, and transitioning to something that's more like, well, we do this way because this is what happened when we didn't.
Yeah.
And that gives people the understanding, the buy-in, and then also the comfort to know, okay, well, they've made mistakes before, and that was okay. And that was the foundational building blocks of why this business is where it is today. That creates that culture of acceptance of failure because they know that failure is going to lead to improvement and progress.
Yeah.
And that makes a huge difference.
I also think that does such a great job of just, again, adding to the culture as a whole. You feel so safe, not only then talking about those failures and everything like that, but also being able to add additional elements to things. Like you were talking about being able to get different perspectives. It is so nice to know that no matter what level you are at our organization, your opinion actually is valid. It actually matters, and it is actually listened to by the ultimate decision makers because everybody is in on the conversation. And I feel like that's one of the things that makes our culture so powerful and gives us all such a better sense of belonging and meaning in the work that we do, because it's not just, this is why we do it, period.
Yeah. It creates equity.
Yeah.
Sharing your failures and sharing, how the proverbial sausage is made
Yeah.
creates equity in the process. Because if people understand that my voice is being heard and this is how, I'm going to change the roadmap and the course of the future of our business when I share this, then they feel like they are a part of something. They feel like they are contributing to the broader good. And it's hard to go to work every day and not feel like you're doing something bigger than whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we're in a very unique position where we can say that we feel that every single day. We're a very small percentage of the population that can say, I go to work every day and I feel like I have a purpose, and here's why.
Yeah.
But if you can create that culture in whatever organization that you're a part of that gives people equity, most people think that equity means I have to have an ownership piece. I have to get a K1. I have to get a distribution check. I have to be on the cap table or whatever to have equity in something. No, you don't.
Yeah.
You can create equity in other non-financial ways that is, quite frankly, most of the time, even more impactful. Because you could have real ownership in something and your voice still not be heard in the process of what you're creating. And it's worse. It's way worse because now it's like I own this and I can't make any impact over this business versus I can actually make impact on this business. I don't really care if I own it, but I'm contributing to something really cool and powerful, and it's impacting other people and people in my community. And that goes so much further than anything else.
Yeah. No, I can personally attest to that. Yeah. How are we holding people accountable while still giving them that opportunity to fail?
So when I talk about things like feedback loops, to expand for people that have not heard about a feedback loop before, is that we're in a day and age where we've all had a cell phone in front of us for the better part of the last 2 decades, right?
Like my entire life.
Ouch.
Screen kid. iPad kid in the flash. No. No, just kidding. I went outside.
We're just accustomed to now.
Yeah.
We get immediate answers. We get immediate feedback. We get immediate results.
The instant gratification.
Yeah, and it's it's a very difficult world to be living in when it comes to that. So if you're not structuring your business so that those feedback loops can be present, then it won't give people room to understand the impact of the failure. It won't give you the ability at the top of the business to see the flags before the failure gets too big. Okay, so what that feedback loop will do is it will alert leadership. It will alert the person that has made the mistake that, hey, you're going off the course a little bit. And that's okay as long as you define what the course is. So in our scorecarding process with our feedback loops, we've defined what bad, good, and excellent is. And so what that tells people is that, okay, if I am currently in the excellent category and I'm going to start spending a little bit more time taking a risk on something else that may or may not create a benefit today, they can understand that, okay, well, I'm still defined as excellent, but I'm experimenting over here on this other project. I'm meeting my deadlines. My customers are happy. My colleagues feel that they can rely upon me. I'm contributing to the things in my community that are important, and you're doing things that align with your core values, but yet you still understand what room you have. So, for every organization, that's going to be different, but every organization can take the time to define what bad looks like in some form of a KPI, what good looks like, and what excellent looks like. And if you can just encourage people to say, we want you to experiment. We want you to make things better. We want you to challenge the system. We want you to think about how we can do things better, because we all will benefit as an organization, and then inherently each of you individually will benefit.
Yeah.
Those guardrails and those definitions will allow for people to self-monitor so that they know if they're veering off in the wrong direction.
So I'm curious if you will speak a little bit more on how you kind of customize that, right? Because obviously my job is very different from an accountant. Okay. Thank God, respectfully. I'm so glad you guys do it. It's just, not for me.
Somebody's got to do it.
Yeah. But, how do you take, obviously you're a big organization and a hopefully continuing to growing organization. And so how does that work then? Because obviously in that scenario, it can't exactly be a one size fits all, right? So how do you customize that for each individual? Is it customized by team? Just kind of how did you work that out?
So I think step one is the strategy of the broader organization, right? So everyone is aligned with one big goal, right? And the simplest way to do that is to say that first funnel into that incentive plan program is the overall health of the organization, right? Because regardless if you're doing marketing services for a business, if you're doing accounting, legal services, if you're working in a manufacturing facility, everybody can stay aligned to that, right? And everybody's core focus can be back to, we want to be excellent at whatever it is that we're doing
As a
together
collective,
as a collective group.
Love
right?
that.
So number one, you've got to start there. So you've got to be able to make sure that everything is rooted back to the overall health of the organization. Okay. And then within the remainder of those guardrails, there's certain things that regardless of your role can be the same, right? By using metrics like NPS scores and understanding how people feel about their colleagues or how people feel, how their clients feel about them to measure whether or not they're going to be recommended to others. Those are things that you can do similarly that align back to your cultural anchors and your core values and things like that. But then as you get more granular and more specific, then you can tie down different goals to different people, right? So for a professional accounting staff, that goal might be a certain amount of revenue generated or a realization rate or a number of clients that they're managing. And you can tie back to quantifiable metrics. And it's important that they're quantifiable metrics because those qualifiable subjective metrics are when you get into trouble.
Yep.
Because everybody's definition is different.
Yeah.
You want immutable data that is not subjective. You want something that people can look at and say, "This, I did this and it moved the needle," right? So as an example from somebody from a marketing perspective, you can tie back to followership on social media. You can tie back to read rates in terms of emails. You can tie back to, just overall buy-in from the entire workforce community in terms of what you're doing. Those are things that you can see, you can measure, and you can track, and you can improve. But that's the most important part of whatever it is that you're doing, is finding that quantifiable thing that you can put in front of every person to make sure that they can see it going up or down based on whatever it is that they're doing. Because that's when you create that culture of embracing failure. Is step one is you have to embrace a culture of being okay with experimenting, because the experimentation process is where the failure ultimately ends up, right?
Sure.
We want you to be able to experiment with different things. You want to create that encouragement and that culture of experimentation first, which then will allow for people to be comfortable with failures because they know that this is a culture of experimentation. We're going to learn. We're going to get better. It takes a lot of intentionality. I mean, that's the moral of the story here, is that this isn't a one-size-fits-all thing, but you can model it for every business. Whether it's an accounting firm, it's a manufacturing facility, whatever it might be, you can sit down and say, what are the things that are most important to us as an organization? And if we are excellent at those things that are important to us, will that inevitably lead to success? And then if you can break those things down further and say, what are those things that are important to us, and what are the things that we need to do every single day that are going to accumulate in terms of success related to those things? And you can see the trickle-down effect of finding success in those areas, finding success individually, and then finding success as a whole as a company.
I love that. I think that layering portion you were talking about is really important too. Like starting with the biggest overarching goals of the company and then kind of breaking it down and then finishing it out with that super specific to your role, to what you're doing, because I think that that's honestly just helpful for everybody too. Like it also gives your people, who honestly most of the time want to do a good job, by the way. And I think that there's sometimes some negative connotation to that employees are going to always try to find a way to get away with something. But maybe it's optimistic, but I think most of the time people do want to do a good job.
Yes.
And ultimately they will do a better job when they know the job that is expected of them. I
have always been shocked by the fact that most organizations, people don't know what success looks like in their roles. Like you walk into businesses all across the country people are successful by accident
Yeah.
in the vast majority of successful businesses, right? Like
so true, though.
if you could sit down and be able to tell people, this is how you contribute to our success.
Yeah.
Number one, they're going to work harder.
Yeah.
If you incentivize them with dollars,
Sure.
they're also going to work harder as a result of that. But ultimately, if people just know the rules to the game,
Yeah. It's
and you
inherently
can
more motivating.
give that information to them every single day, and you can reiterate that on a regular basis. Like, you need to continue to tell the story every single day. It can't just be some bullshit that you put on the wall,
Right.
right?
Yep,
It's got to be
yep.
something that, like, you live, eat, and breathe inside of your organization. We don't shut up about it.
Yeah. Right.
You know, that's a big part of it, is that you've got to keep continuing to repeat that over and over and over again. And if there's a temptation to handle a problem differently than what it says on the wall, you can't.
Mm-hmm.
You need to answer those problems and deal with those challenges in the way that you know you need to, based on those core values.
Yeah. Really using those as a guide. Have you ever rewarded someone for a quote unquote smart failure? So have you ever celebrated anything or tried to shine a positive light to a failure that, you know, maybe ultimately was a failure, but maybe even if it's how they handled it? Or do you have anything that comes to mind when I ask you something like that?
Yeah, I mean, we just had an example the other day of this, which is funny that you ask, because in our world, and probably very true in others in different industries, we have to bid work. So we get opportunities for new clients, and we have to go out and we've got to bid what we think that's going to cost. Which, when you really think about it, especially when you look at the construction industry, when you look at any of those specific industries that are bidding work, it's complicated,
Yeah.
right? Because there's a lot of different layers of a job. You know, let's look at a construction project. We're building a house. You've got the foundation, you got the walls, you got the exterior, you got the roof, you have labor challenges, all those things that could ultimately go wrong, right? And we put a bid out for a project, and we bid competitively against 5 other firms. And when we looked at the comparison, we got the feedback afterwards, we didn't win the job. And it was a client we were really excited about. It was somebody that, like, culturally was an excellent fit for us. They were what we have defined as an ideal client in our profile. And we didn't win the work, which was sad, right? And it's tempting to look at that situation and say, well, that was a failure and we did something wrong. But we were able to sit down with them because we had a great relationship, and they were very forthcoming with us and said, well, this is the story, is that company A, B, and C, you guys all bid right around the same amount of money for this project. Okay. And the first and foremost, when you know who company A, B, and C is, and you see them out in the community, and you know that they are who you have aspired to be in organizations that you feel like you're in the same playground or sandbox with, then that's reassuring to understand that, okay, well, we competitively bid this right. We did it correctly. There was someone else, let's say organization D, that came in and underbid everyone by like half, right? So let's say, for simple math, we all bid $30,000. This other organization bid $15,000. We know with confidence that that work cannot be done for $15,000. And I say that because we know that if someone is underbidding all of our organizations that have been around for decades and decades and decades, that organization is either not bidding it correctly, or they're not considering the long-term effects of going to market at a much cheaper price. Because showing up and not charging the right price is like the cardinal sin in business. Because if you don't charge the right price for whatever it is that you're doing, you can't pay people appropriately.
Yeah.
If you can't pay people appropriately, you will have a higher grade of turnover than everyone else. If you have higher turnover than everyone else, then the quality of your product will inevitably suffer, right? So we came back as a group of our leadership team and said, we lost this bid. And we didn't get a client that we really, really wanted. And we would have gotten them had it not been for this other organization that underbid us drastically. But we were able to look at that and celebrate the loss because, number one, we bid it correctly. And number two, we know that we're doing the right thing for our people. Right. And we know that inevitably what's going to happen is that place that bid that project at half of what we did won't be able to service that client. And then when that client does eventually and inevitably come back to us, we will service them properly. Our people will be better. Our people will be happier. And it will be a healthy organization as a result of it. So, those things are going to come up, but you've got to share them with people. Yeah. And you've got to celebrate those stories of, hey, this didn't work out the way that we wanted it to, but we did it right. And we know that had we won this client, we would have serviced it properly. Yeah. They would have been happy. Our people would have been happy. And we're doing the right thing.
I love that as an example, especially because that was just another perfect example of how you stick to the values that you say that you do. Like you said, they're not just on the wall. And like you were saying earlier, like you have to use those to guide even when it's hard, even when it hurts. And like that's a perfect example of the business doing that and of you all as a leadership team doing that. Like, and really making sure that you are not compromising your values just because you wanted that or that was a great client or whatever. It's like, no, we will be here the same as we are, ready to accept you whenever you're ready. And kind of knowing our value,
And it's much harder to do that when you're in the early stages of your business.
Yeah.
When you're just getting started in your business, you want to just say,
I'll do it.
If you can fog a mirror, you're my kind of client.
Yeah.
Right. And in every business, it's very tempting to just open that door wide open and say, whoever wants to come in, comes in. But what you do if you do that early on in your business is you set yourself up for long-term failure because it's too late to fix it. Mm-hmm. Because what happens is you create this group of clients, you create this group of customers around you that don't understand your value, that are only coming to you because you're a cheap provider. And then the minute that you realize you've made a mistake, like now it's time to fix it. Now it's time to pivot, right? Yeah. And the reason that you have to pivot is because you had a tremendous amount of turnover and your life sucks and you're working 100 hours a week and you're just a slave to your business because you didn't charge the right price. Now you've got to go to all those clients and say, you know what, I was wrong. And I got to charge the right price. And guess what? That client was only with you because you were cheap.
Yep.
That customer was only coming to you because you were a lesser price than everybody else. So it forces you to start over. And starting over when you've already got an infrastructure built and you've got rent payments and you've got utility payments and you've got all these other things that are preventing you from making the right healthy decision in your business gets to be really, really hard. Like if you build a big business and try to make that transition, it's tough.
Do you have any personal experience in this scenario?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, a lot of these things that we talk about, I speak about because they're my own failures.
Yeah.
These are things that I'm very transparent about.
It seemed very personal and from a very genuine place. So I was just curious.
Because we saw it. I mean, I felt it like in the early years of our business, we started in the peak of the financial crisis. Yeah. And, I was a young guy. I was a nobody. Nobody knew who the heck we were and why they should come to us. And it was very tempting early on. And we did it. We charged people nowhere near the right price for the services. And we accumulated a large group of clients that we were not pricing them appropriately. And everybody around me was burning out, myself included. And then I talk about the 10 years of the beginning of my career that I worked 7 days a week. And ultimately that happened because of that, because we weren't charging the right price and I couldn't maintain the appropriate staff and I couldn't do the things that I needed to do to best service our clients. I put myself in a really, really bad position. Now, I was lucky enough. The reason that we were able to change, though, the reason that we were able to make that pivot was because I did not fall to the same challenge that everybody else typically does, is they fall into that rat race where they've got to keep up with the Joneses and they've got that kind of bleed into their personal finances where they're getting
Lifestyle
bigger.
creep.
The lifestyle creep,
Ooh,
exactly.
lifestyle
Yes, like
creep. It gets a lot of people.
you can't change.
Yeah.
Right at that point, you're like, okay, well, I have to work this 100 hours a week so that I can pay for the extra house. I can pay for the fancy car. I can pay for the fancy clothes. I got to keep up and keep going to these fancy restaurants and show up to my quote unquote friends
Yeah.
because that's what everybody thinks I should be doing. And that is the mistake that most people make, is that they put themselves in a position where they have to be a slave to the business. They've got to work 100 hours a week to keep up with it, and they don't have the resources behind them to change. So you've got to keep your personal expenses low at home, and you've got to be reasonable about those things if you truly want to build something healthy and sustainable.
Yeah. I'm curious, being in that scenario, when did you realize that you were undervaluing yourself? Is that something you always knew? Or was there a moment where you were like, uh-oh?
Well, I think this is an interesting conundrum of like when that should happen, because quite frankly, at the beginning, I was brand new. And I should be charging what I charged. Like, there's no reason that I could say, all right, well, had I done things differently, I would have charged what I should have charged at the beginning, because no one would have paid it.
Yeah.
Right? Because we're just getting started.
And how do you know your value? I guess that's another thing to kind of.
So I think step one is being able to identify where you're at in the process and understand like when it gets to be too much. Like for me, that identifying time was when we started to lose really good people.
Yeah.
We had really good people in our organization. They decided to go elsewhere because we couldn't pay them enough. We couldn't give them the path to what it meant for their career. And we started to lose people that we should not have lost.
Okay.
So that was the flag that kind of got thrown up at some point that said we need to do something different. But understanding your value is tricky. That's one that I didn't really start to understand until I got out of my bubble. And I was like, here in Youngstown, Ohio, we've got a bubble that in a lot of small communities is the same. Like you have this mindset inside of a small town or inside of a community where you think you're only as good as, whatever is in your area,
Sure.
right? What allowed me to understand that we were really good at what we were doing and that we provided a very high value was going nationally and meeting with other people, going to your industry conferences, engaging in relationships, a lot of which started on LinkedIn. And just starting engaging with other people across the country and saying, how are you doing things? What are you charging? Looking at businesses that were really, really successful and getting a better understanding of how they're doing things, and then measuring yourself against that and saying, okay, well, what are they charging and what are they doing? And how do their clients feel about them? Right. And from our perspective, I had enough of those conversations, not only with those people, but then eventually having conversation with those customers and those clients. Right. We would bring in customers and clients from really, really big, successful firms.
Back to the focus groups.
Right.
I love a focus group.
And we would get a good indication of, okay, these people were paying a tremendous amount of money for a service. And they weren't getting anywhere near what we're providing.
Yeah.
So what are we doing wrong? Like understanding price elasticity in your market is a big, big challenge. Understanding where you can go in terms of price.
Explain that a little bit more.
So price elasticity, think of it like a rubber band. All right. So you have to understand how far you can pull the rubber band. And when I talk about the rubber band, I talk about the price that you can charge. Okay, so at the beginning of your business, you're pulling on the rubber band like this because you don't really feel comfortable charging the appropriate price for what you're doing. But as you get better and better and better, you should be pulling that rubber band a little bit further, right? And the measurement of elasticity is how far can you pull it until it breaks. Right? You don't want to pull it too far because and break it, but you don't want to leave it here because if you leave it here and you don't pull it, then it will never have any functional elasticity long term, right? So you've got to put yourself in this environment where you feel comfortable pulling the rubber band. Pulling the rubber band is a very uncomfortable thing. because it forces you to have conversations that are difficult. And we come back to that concept of that radical candor. And it can't just happen. If you want to have that environment culturally, internally, you also have to have it externally.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to challenge things and be comfortable coming to your clients and saying, this is what we charge because this is the value we're bringing. Right? You know, we've worked with clients, for example, in the retail space, and they have a really great product. They have an American-made product that's locally made. It has great artwork on it. It's just a beautiful thing, what they're producing. And there are people that compare it to something that is commercially made in China, doesn't have any soul to it, doesn't have any reflection of your culture and your community. And somebody says, well, I can go buy this for $10. Why would I pay this for $30? Right? You've got to be comfortable having that conversation and saying the reason you're going to pay $30 for our product and $10 for this one is because our product's going to last. Our product's going to stand the test of time. It's made in America. It's designed by people here in this community. It's produced in this community. And it is a higher quality. Like, you've got to have that confidence not only in yourself, but in your product that you're providing that is better than that other competitor.
Where would you say that confidence comes from? Or how do you develop that if you're struggling with that?
I mean, I think the confidence comes from a place of just trying other things, right? And understanding what your competitors are doing, right? So the example I've given before is we've got an organization in town that they've been around for many, many years. They make pepperoni rolls, and they are the best damn pepperoni rolls I have ever had. Okay. And
Cries and gluten-free, but yeah, anyway. Sheds tear.
I'm showing my Youngstown right now. So we're talking about Roni rolls. You know, and I remember having a conversation with them where I went into their shop and I saw the pepperoni rolls on the shelf, and I saw that they were charging whatever, it's $2 for the pepperoni roll. And I went down the street just as a social experiment, basically, and I went to the gas station and I got a pepperoni roll, right? And that pepperoni roll at the gas station was $4. And the pepperoni roll at the gas station was disgusting, as you would expect. I mean, you've seen the roller dogs before.
Yeah.
At the gas station.
Jump
right?
scare.
Yeah. And so I came back to them and I showed them. I said, this is your pepperoni roll. This is the pepperoni roll that I got at the gas station down the street. I want you to taste both and tell me which one is better. Okay. And naturally, what do you think they said? Obviously, their pepperoni roll is leaps and bounds better than this pepperoni roll. Yeah. And I said, do you know what this pepperoni roll down the street costs? And I said, no, we have no idea. I said, that's your first mistake. You can't understand your value because you're not paying attention. You're not listening to the market, right? You've got to go around and experiment and look at those things and be attentive to the world around you, or else you'll get left behind. That pepperoni roll in 1975 for $2 might have been the right price to charge, right? And you might have been at the top of the market for the premium product that you're creating. But it ain't today.
Yeah.
Inflation happens fast. Things change. Product costs are different. So like it's a constant effort of being an understanding of your value. It's much easier when you're producing a tangible product, right? Like if you're making a widget, if you're making a pepperoni roll, if you're making a cheeseburger, you can understand what your competitors are charging and you can try it and you can understand what's better and what's worse and portion size and so on and so forth. It gets really difficult when you're looking at this from like a service provider perspective. You know, if you're a marketer, if you're an accountant, if you're a lawyer, you know, understanding the apples to apples comparison of what the value is that you're creating versus someone else is hard. But the way that you can do that analysis is just by listening. Right, is by talking to people that maybe aren't even prospective customers, but just other business owners, other people that are in that same field, and asking them the question, what service are you getting? What are you paying? Do you like it? Are you comfortable with it? Yeah. And it's not necessarily an easy thing to get comfortable doing, but with practice, it gets more and more comfortable, and you get more confident, and you build your understanding of your value. And there's no shortcut to this. Like that, I wish I could tell you the shortcut. Like this is the thing that you can do tomorrow that's going to make your business better. making your business better comes from a place of intentionality, and like you've got to play the long game in whatever it is that you're doing.
So you're
and
not
be
going to
attentive.
sell me a course for $9.99
That's right.
that's going to
Yeah.
tell me what I can do tomorrow. That's going to pop
This
up.
is the one thing that made me, a billionaire. Yeah.
Right.
You won't get that one from me.
Good. So you did say something though that I do kind of want to touch on a little bit. There is also, you mentioned kind of just like the time versus value. You mentioned it briefly, but I kind of wanted to expand on that a little bit. So I know, like, for me, even like you mentioned marketing services as an example. So if I want to go out and do like freelance work, that's hard for me to come up with an idea of how much to charge someone, because number one, for me, it's fairly easy in comparison too. So there's also the aspect where I'm like, oh, it'll only take me 30 minutes because I'm good at it and I do it all the time. Yep. And so for me, it's like, whatever, like, but the value is ultimately probably way more than I'm giving myself credit for.
For sure.
And I just would love to hear your opinion on that, because I think that probably is a more common problem, especially with service-based businesses or entrepreneurs, how to accurately value the work that you do and all of that time and effort, because I'm 7, 8, 10 years into these skills. And like, how does that translate when you're trying to price something?
Yeah, I think that the best answer that I can give to you is do your homework, right? Because if you go down the rabbit hole of selling your time, then all the investment that you made into getting better at what you do becomes worth less over a longer period of time. All right. So if you're saying, okay, this takes me a half hour and I'm going to charge based on some hourly rate, the only reason that takes you a half hour is because of the years of experience that you have in doing it. If someone was starting from scratch, it probably takes them 10, but it takes you a half hour. Right? So you've got to look beyond time. You've got to separate time from value, because time and value when it comes to services are not the same thing. Right? I might be able to do something in a half hour that generates $10,000 worth of value to you as an advisor.
I'd like to learn that skill. You want to share that one real quick?
Well, give me your tax returns and your financial statements. We'll see what we can do. But I mean, if that's the case, you have to look at value.
Yeah.
You can't look at your initial input as time. Your initial input to your assessment of your price needs to be, what value am I creating? Okay, so from a marketing perspective, can you correlate the work that you're doing as a marketing professional to a revenue that this person is going to generate? Can you correlate the service that you're providing as a marketing professional to clicks on their website or clicks on their social media or likes? And what are those likes worth? And what are those clicks worth? And what is that website traffic worth? And what's your conversion rate once you get someone to the website in terms of translating that into actual revenue? When you can go that deep down the path and you can point to, this is the specific value that I'm creating in your organization, it's much easier to come up with the right price. But not everybody has access to that. Right? Not everybody has access to that depth of data when it comes to working with potential customers. So the simplest way to look at it is, who is doing well in my space? Who are the brands? Who are the businesses that are highly regarded, that are highly respected, that I want to be when I grow up? Right? And what are they charging? Right? You want the shortcut. You want the 10-second clip to be able to sell our $9.99 course. It's cheat a little bit. Look at what your competitors are doing, because if they've been doing it for 20, 30 years and they're a healthy, great organization, then that's a good place to start.
Okay, so this whole section is kind of just on leadership wisdom, essentially. So in your opinion, why is failure an essential part of strong leadership?
I think that any brand, any business, any person, leader of any magnitude, has built something on a mountain of failures. And if you take a step back and look at anything that we've created, right? You look at our iPhones. Mm-hmm. Look at all the iterations of failures that it took to get where we are today. And if organizations that are sustainable, generationally recognizable, brands like McDonald's, brands like Chick-fil-A, brands like Disney, brands like Apple, you've watched the iterations of what they have done over the years. And those failures are also kind of subjective to whatever era that we're in, right? Something may have been a failure in the 90s that wouldn't be a failure today, right? And if you look at things from that perspective and you have a shift of perspective and how you look at businesses, evolution is forced by failures, right? And evolution ultimately, as human beings, if we made a mistake, we died, right? And it was a little bit more of a direct result of that failure, right? But now, as a business, as a leader, as someone that your failures aren't necessarily life and death decisions, but those are the things that are contributing to your evolution. And the sooner that you can kind of shift that perspective and look at other really, really well-respected businesses that you feel some connection to, you can look at them over the course of history and say, how have they changed and why did they change? I promise you the reason that they changed was because there was a failure. And those failures, might be something just as simple as, this worked for a period of time, the trend changed, we continued to do it, it was no longer popular, and we needed to change. But that's an example of a quote unquote a failure at some point in that product's life cycle or that business's life cycle. And when you can look at things from that perspective, it's much easier to evolve as a business.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think obviously businesses have to adapt, right? I mean, humans, we all have to adapt, but businesses do too. And I think that's a great example where if you look at these businesses that have been popular for so long, they absolutely have changed because they have to. We are not the same culture that we were 5 years ago, that we were 15 or 50 years ago. If you're not adapting anything in most industries, you're going to fail. And you're going to fail to the point of you're not going to exist anymore.
Yep.
And so I think that that's a really, really good thing to point out. Another question that I have for you here is, what would you say to a founder or an executive who wants to build a fail-friendly culture but doesn't know where to start?
I think trying to find your first example of what is important to you and how you're ultimately getting there. I mean, I think if I'm thinking about that from our business's perspective, and I think about what was that first thing that caused me to kind of lean into this mentality. I was lucky enough to have good people around me that showed me the way, right? And I could ask those questions too. So if I'm in that position, I'm going to someone that has built something of the magnitude that I want to. I'm going to someone that I look up to. I'm going to that mentor. I'm going to that guide, and I'm starting to ask them these questions of, hey, you're in the same industry as me. You have the life that I want to have. You have maybe for some people, the things that I want to have. What are the things that you needed to do to get there? And if you're looking at your business compared to their business and saying, how do I close that gap? That gap is closed because of a list of failures, right? So you can go to that person that you look up to, that mentor, that guide, and you can extrapolate those things from them. I mean, you don't have to just go and start failing in your business to improve. You can start to look to them to say, what are my blind spots? What are the things that I'm not paying attention to? And start to look at yourself from their perspective and think about the things that you can change. So I think number one is having the right connections and the right people around you and building your network up appropriately so that you can get different pieces of perspective about your business. And then number two is being able to sit down and have those conversations with yourself in the mirror, right? You've got to be able to look at yourself and say, did I do something wrong? Did my employee do something wrong? Did I set the wrong expectations with the client? And have those difficult conversations with yourself. Because if you can't have that difficult conversation with yourself first, you're not going to be able to have that difficult conversation with your employee. You're not going to be able to have that difficult conversation with your customers. So I think it's just getting comfortable with putting that mirror in front of yourself and asking that question, like, what am I doing wrong? And getting to the core of what's going wrong. And once you can have that conversation with yourself, you can have that conversation with anybody. You're going to be the hardest person that this conversation is going to be had with. The conversation is much easier with other people because you are your own worst critic always. You always will be. So.
All right. Well, I think that's probably it for today. I feel like we had a lot of excellent nuggets in there again.
We made it through two.
We made it through two.
Let's go.
Next time we will hopefully have some of those additional perspectives that you love so much. So
I'm getting excited about our guests.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Thank you so much for listening. This podcast wouldn't be possible without Stonefruit Studios and Bentley Studios. If you'd like to support the podcast, the most impactful thing you can do is subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, and leave a review and/or comment. If you found this episode particularly helpful, we also encourage you to share it with a friend or on social media. Until next time, keep learning, growing, and failing forward.